Good evening, everybody. It's amazing how good this camera is with such low light that we're still able to record with video like this. I really like it. Very happy with this. I wanted to talk about politics a little bit. And I was listening to, again, someone who I respect very highly and I think is one of the great political commentators of our age, is Dinesh D'Souza. And I know Steven Crowder likes his ideas but doesn't like listening to him. I actually enjoy listening to Dinesh. I find him to be a very good presentator, and he really articulates basic conservative ideologies very well. And he explains, like I often say, and I didn't hear this from him, but I guess I kind of developed this idea between listening to Dinesh D'Souza and Glenn Beck, of how American conservatism, the American right, is radically different than the right in pretty much any other country in the world. And one major aspect of American conservatism, as opposed to European conservatism, is that American conservatism is expressly liberal and classically liberal. It is and authentically liberal. So, how do we understand that? What does that mean? Because it's the people on the left who call themselves liberals. But the fact of the matter is, they are not liberals. They call themselves liberals, but they are not. They are leftists. They are statists. And like I've said in many other videos, the European right and the European left are two sides of the same coin, two prongs on the same fork, and the American right is the opposite end of that fork, is the handle of the fork. And you really can't make a comparison really between the American right and the European right. And there's a term that was thrown around a lot a couple of years ago, the alt-right. And the alt-right is really essentially the European right. And the American right are the authentic classical liberals. And I want to talk about what does that mean to be classically liberal. And one thing that Dinesh D'Souza said in the video is the difference between the liberal and the libertarian is that the liberal, between the classical liberal, which is the American conservative, which is not real, a better term is the difference between the conservative and the libertarian, the American conservative and the libertarian, is that a libertarian does not care about virtue. Meaning, the way that Dinesh D'Souza said it is that the libertarian has no concern with virtue, so he would think that it's a perfectly good system if the way that he expresses it is that if the whole country were to engage in a pursuit that might have ill repute as far as how to conduct oneself how to make a living, that would be a perfectly good society. And I think the mistake that Dinesh D'Souza is making there is that, and I think it harkens back to something that we were discussing, I believe, last night, is the difference between law and morality and ethics. Meaning not everything that is legal is moral or ethical. And that's certainly the case, as we discussed to a certain extent, in religious law, that we have religious laws. That's one reason why a lot of people are offended by the Talmud. They see this book that says things that people are shocked by. What they don't understand is that they're taking these passages out of context. And it's not that they're saying this is a good thing to do. They're saying this is the legal consequences of this type of behavior, not what's good or bad. But rather in a legalistic sense of how to approach these different issues. That's really what it comes down to. And so too, I would say when it comes to this question of liberty and libertarianism, the question of what's legal is not the question of what's right. Meaning a lot of people, when it comes to the drug issue, right, they assume, libertarians are just all about getting high, and that's what it's all about. And is there that wing of the Libertarian Party? Yes, and I really don't have. That's the reason why I personally am not a libertarian, because I don't want those people to be our leaders. I don't want to choose people like that as our leadership. I don't think that it's wise to engage in these practices. However, just because it's a stupid thing to do, and maybe even a wrong thing to do, and something that certainly should be avoided, it doesn't mean that someone should necessarily have to go to jail for doing something stupid, as long as they're not hurting anybody else. And so too, I think, an example that a lot of people will bring as to the difference between Judaism and Islam. With all due respect to Islam, I have a lot of respect for Muslims and for Islam. I believe that they're worshiping the same God that we worship. No matter what the history of their worship was earlier, Maimonides says already in his time in the 1200s, Libam l'shamayim, their heart is to heaven. They are worshiping the same God as we worship, even though their ancestors worshipped idols. That is the way that Maimonides expresses himself as far as the Muslims. Their heart is to heaven. And the same thing, I would say, is with the Christians as well. In any event, the point that I want to bring out here is that a difference between Judaism and Islam is, and again, this is maybe not classically how Islam expressed itself all throughout history. Maybe it did, maybe it didn't. But it's certainly, and today there are some Muslims who are very upset with this part of Islam, is that you have certain aspects of Islamic society who, for example, seek to ban pork, ban swine products, right? And ban the advertisement of these products, right? Totally. Throughout society, they seek to make halal meat available not only for Muslims, but kind of impose it on society in general as much as they can, which would be offensive to the Sikhs, right? The Jewish approach is we don't eat pork, and we only eat kosher meat, and we have very little interest in other people eating that. if they want to, goes into Hague. Don't have a problem with it, but it's not really. It's not really that important unless you want to convert to Judaism. Meaning, to a certain extent, Islam sees that there is a Sharia, a deen that is universal, whereas really, if you study classical Islam, there's a difference between deen and Sharia. Deen is universal and Sharia is not, but we don't have to get into that right now, but because we're criticizing Islam respectfully, Judaism, we're again, and I understand there is a certain amount of, I would say, intellectual honesty or respect for others that perhaps in a certain sense is lacking in this Jewish approach, that, you know, we do our thing and you do your thing, but it's also pragmatic and practical, but also classical. We don't have a classical approach that everyone must follow Jewish law. We have that everyone must follow the laws of Noah, and people have the option of choosing Judaism, choosing Jewish law, accepting it upon themselves, which would include even encouraging people to do so, perhaps, which I understand is controversial, but classically there's nothing wrong with it. It's just something we essentially stopped doing because of fear and because of persecution. But even in an ideal state where we're not persecuted, we do not have a belief that everyone must accept Judaism. It's a choice. Do you want to follow the 7 laws of Noah, or do you want to follow Judaism? A lot of people are under the mistake to say that it's better for the non-Jew to keep the 7 laws of Noah and not convert to Judaism, but that's not actually true. We do see it as better for someone to convert to Judaism, but if someone is unable to, the b'diavad, the post facto approach is the 7 laws of Noah. But we're not going around forcing other people not to eat pork. And essentially also we are in exile. It would seem that even with these other issues that exist in the world, should it really be our business what the rest of the world does? Even in regards to the 7 laws of Noah, I can hear both sides of that question, and I tend to err on the side of, at least when it comes to 7 laws of Noah, we should be encouraging the world to keep those laws. We should. It is our business, and there is a certain level of things in society that, you know, if we are given a vote, so our vote should be to uphold the 7 laws of Noah. Whether or not that vote is going to be the winning vote. But with that being said, we can understand and recognize that it's not always going to be that way, and we can accept that we're living in a society where we're not necessarily able to enforce those laws. And then when it comes to other things that are not even within that realm, really, I think we should pretty much just keep our mouths shut. If we don't have a horse in the game, you know, I said before that, you know, I don't think people should be voting if they're not educated and not informed about the issues and not making an educated decision about why they're voting a certain way. Again, I'm not saying to ban people from doing so, but I'm saying that I don't see it as a value that, you know, this whole get out the vote, just to get people to vote when they don't really know what it's all about. I wouldn't encourage that type of thing. But when it comes to the other things on the other side, when it comes to issues that don't affect us, right? Maybe we should just stay out of it, right? And so an example would have to be legalization of drugs. I appreciate that, like, for example, recently there's discussion in New Jersey about legalization of marijuana, and a number of rabbis in Lakewood, New Jersey, which is a very strong Orthodox Jewish community, signed a kol koreh, a proclamation prohibiting the use of marijuana even if it's legal. With that being said, they never said, as far as I know, although maybe some did, that it should be illegal. They could just say, let them do what they want to do, it's not for us. And really, it's something that I'm not interested in, so I don't really have a horse in this game. But I can understand the libertarian feeling to say, you know what, you can make your own decisions on these things. And part of our decisions in life is our freedom of religion, which includes the freedom of assembly and the freedom of association. That if we choose to be part of a community, then that community can police itself and tell people, you know what, we don't want you, if you're part of this community, we don't want you engaging in recreational marijuana use. But we don't see any reason to say that the state should say, and I personally believe that the federal government should decriminalize marijuana, and I believe that the criminalization of marijuana has destroyed more lives than marijuana has destroyed. I believe that people being thrown in prison for using this drug has done far more damage to society than the drug itself. And I'm not saying the drug is a good thing, but I'm saying there has to be a balanced approach, and that people can make decisions on their own without the government telling them how to do it. We don't need the government to tell us to say no to drugs, or or to criminalize drugs. We can make those decisions on our own as responsible adults and recognize that we shouldn't be doing this, and we don't need the threat of the government to keep us from doing that. And the same thing with any number of these issues. And I think, in a certain sense, that's, to me, the conservative libertarian value, is that you can make these decisions on your own, self-government. You don't need the nanny state to tell you not to use drugs, not to engage in many other things that the government prohibits, that we find to be unsavory and oppose. We can figure that out on our own without, like I said, the nanny state telling us how to conduct ourselves. And I think, so in a certain sense, that's why I would probably vote if there was some kind of referendum, or on legalization of marijuana. And also, like I said, the damage that it does to people's lives being incarcerated for drug use. But we can do so without we ourselves using it. And we can also discourage people from using it without it being illegal. And not only within our own community, but perhaps in other communities as well. I do see a value a greater value than getting people to get out the vote, um, is to say legalize marijuana, but I'm going to invest time in convincing people not to use it because I think it's stupid. Um, but again, I don't think being stupid should be against the law. So thank you for watching. God bless. Please like, share, and subscribe, comment, and we'll see you all later.